All right, we're live. Hi, everyone. This is Anshul, and you're watching to the June15 podcast. And today we have with us Sara Sharp. Sara is the founding partner of SK&S Law Group. She is the deal attorney. She is the go-to lawyer for all accountants. She's also the founder of the Deal Academy, which is an e-learning platform. She has courses on M&A, deal making, negotiation, and a lot of important topics. And she's also the co-host of the Dealmakers podcast. And she has a very creative way of how she goes about it. She talks about deals that didn't quite make it and then uses them to teach you and us about how to do it right. So Sara, welcome.
Oh, thank you for that great intro, Anshul. This is great. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, yeah. So tell us a bit about your experience and how did you end up being a lawyer for accountants?
Oh gosh, I left a large my trajectory. I see a lot of my clients have a similar one. I was at one of the top 5 largest law firms in the U.S. doing corporate finance, and I left to go out on my own. So that's something I hear a lot, depending on the age of the client. Whether it's the big 8 or the big 4 that they left. And went out on their own. So I left corporate finance in 2016 and then automatically started getting some referrals because people said, oh, you were doing mergers and acquisitions for banks. How different could it be to do mergers and acquisitions for accountants? And the answer is completely different and in no way the same. It is not at all related. But after doing a couple of them, there was critical mass and I started doing more and more and getting a lot of referrals, building a specialty, and it's my favorite client base. I love working with accountants. They make the best clients. When you sit down at the end of the year, you're supposed to sit down and look at your clients and think, which clients were my favorite, basically, which ones were, lucrative, but it felt like subjectively lucrative. It felt easy to do the work and work with the people. And, year after year, the top 5 were accountants buying or selling their accounting practices. So it's just a no-brainer to dig further into it and hyper specialize.
That's been my experience too, working with accounting firms. Like they're just the nicest people. Slow to change though. That's the only, if I had a complaint, that would be my only complaint. Yeah. Extremely slow to change. Yeah. But like a lovely group of people.
Yeah, really fantastic from a professional services perspective. They're very generally not, they have been in your position a lot. So generally my clients are, they'll ask me for something, super quick turnaround over the weekend, but they self-regulate. And when they do, it's usually really called for. So that's nice. It's not everything a 4-alarm fire.
Yeah. So tell me more about M&A. That's a hot topic these days in the accounting world. So what are some trends you're seeing? What's happening in the M&A space?
Well, so I speak primarily to the $5 million and below mark. That's kind of my area of expertise. Although, of course, I'm seeing what's going on in the rest of the market as well. And I think I've seen panels. I've gone to conferences. There's a lot of private equity entering the accounting practice space. Absolutely true. It's just not new. So I have seen a ton of it. I think private equity is entering. They're increasing the multiples by which these practices sell. Not all of the practices, but there's a certain profile of practice that private equity is particularly interested in. And it's almost getting to the point where, because they have the cash and they don't have to rely on like getting a bank loan to afford the practice. And because all of there's a handful of private equity shops that have lots of cash and are interested in the exact same profile of firm. And it's almost getting to where regular folks who just, want to take out a bank loan and buy a firm can't get the cream of the crop anymore. The multiples are way too high to finance right now. So, when I have a really good practice that meets the metrics private equity is interested in, I mean, there's really no competing for somebody who's going to do the traditional offer of like 90% SBA loan, 10% seller note with a 1.25x gross revenue multiple. That's just not going to cut it unless there's kind of, let's say, something that only a mother could love about the firm, or some like baggage that the person's willing to take on. So it's it's a hard learning for a lot of people, because I think a lot of folks who are buying firms enter the space seeing the article titles about how 72% of the members of the AICPA are over 65. And they think, wow, there's this huge wealth transfer happening, and these sellers have to be desperate to offload these firms for a great price. But the reality is the good ones are really sought after still.
So what is the profile that private equity goes after, right? You
Yeah.
mentioned, yeah. So
Well, there's some trends that are pretty interesting. So, if I were running an accounting practice, I would try to get squarely into the like 3 to 4 million gross revenue mark. I will say before that, there's this mark that maybe this will resonate with some people who listen. Around the 900,000, it's the hardest. It's absolutely
okay,
hardest. When folks are running their practices in their 900,000, 1.2 million gross revenue, those are my clients who are working they're working their brains off, and they have the narrowest margin. So they're still not bumping up to where they're not dealing with every single fire themselves, because they don't have enough margin to have hired. And really, in order to bump up past that, like kind of waterboarding of work that's happening at that phase, you have to go in the red for a little bit, or at least be comfortable with a leaner margin so that you can build out your staff to be able to take things off your shoulders. And that, as you identified at the beginning, right, accountants are reluctant to change. And so a lot of folks get stuck in this, I don't have the margin to grow beyond this. And therefore I can't get this off my shoulders. And now I'm in this, place where I can't get the work off of me. So nobody wants to buy at that range because you're buying a very, very challenging job. Not nobody, but it's less attractive.
yep.
Once, you get over 2.5 million, people, or really over 2 million, people have the systems in place where usually it's not everything on one person's shoulders, which is a hard firm type to buy. Then that any systematizing, people, ask how much, how many people are coming into the office to drop off shoe boxes, right? And hopefully the answer is none, or there is no office because remote work is really, really valued. All the normal things that you hear, having price increases. You don't want a smattering of 642 1040s that average out to be $160 a pop. Like, that's not going to be what private equity wants to come in on. They want to come in and they want to see, a right kind of practice mix, and hopefully some monthly recurring revenue built in there. So more of a wraparound type of service offering that, CAS, if you will. And those are the main things. The more remote you can, they're not super crazy about leases, but they'll participate in the lease. And then the final thing that makes it very attractive is a younger owner. So what they want is somebody who's going to stay on for the transition, because most of the platform type of accounting practices are growing really rapidly, and they have plans to put, systems in place and tax managers and all of those things, and they will. But in that interim, while they're doing this growth, they want somebody who's going to hang out and be interested to continue to participate for 3 years, 5 years, maybe more. So that's not the profile of a lot of folks who, wait until they're very, very, very ready to retire, and then they wait 5 years beyond that, and then they're ready to sell. So.
That is the best insight into private equity I've ever heard from anyone. I was taking notes furiously. I was like, this is just outstanding. Um, so tell me more about the sellers, right? So other than like retirement, right? Like, what other kind of is there a particular type of seller that's coming forward?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of folks are fully doing this. Like, they're building a practice for the purpose of selling it. And that is novel. There's a lot of There's a lot of sellers who meet this younger criteria who, I guess, selling the practice is a solution to a different problem they're having. Like they had a succession plan involving an internal buyout, and their intended successor just quit, and that was their whole runway plan. So they want to go ahead and sell so that they can become just an employee and work for the
Mhm.
business. They want that off their shoulders, and they want to liquidate the equity that they have in their business. Really, a lot of these folks, it's accountants, right? They're pretty decent at managing money. So as a whole, so I mean, we're not talking about financial planners, right? Like
Yep.
they're way better than that. No, I'm just kidding. But they're pretty good at managing their money. So if you can cash that equity out now and diversify your investment, it's not all in your business. That can be really valuable to somebody who is wanting to have a sure thing versus if you're waiting for retirement and you have this kind of amorphous idea that you'll be able to retire when you sell your practice, but you're not really sure what you'll be able to sell it for, what the expenses will be, how long you'll have to work after. That's not very appealing to accountants who like to plan, right? I
Mhm.
mean, that leaves a lot up in the air for your retirement. A lot of people would rather have a known quantity 10 years prior to retirement and be able to, know what it's going to be, eliminate that ambiguity and eliminate that risk and make plans accordingly. So that's the thing. And then a lot of partners who are maybe having different visions for the firm, right? And they could just split up. They could sue each other. They could, do all kinds of things, or they could sell their practice, split the money, and go their own way. There's a lot of times where a sale is maybe not your first thought, but it's a really great solution to a problem that a practice is experiencing.
That again, like that is the best answer. Like I don't have any follow-up questions on that.
You're so kind. I should do this all day. Thank you for asking.
No, as you were answering, like I keep thinking like my answers need to be better, right? She's just so good. So all right. So talent shortages, right? So that's what everyone's like outside of private equity, like that's the other topic that's on everyone's mind. Right. So
Yeah.
how has that impacted your business, like as in like your world, like in the M&A world? Like is it
Yeah.
bringing out a particular type of buyer, like or like to tell me more about how that's impacting the M&A world.
I mean, absolutely. There, a lot of times I hear this all day long. Buying the workers is the buyer will say, that's what I'm buying. And that's been a theme I've been hearing more and more is not just people saying, okay, they want to buy a client list, right? They say, I want to buy the staff. They've worked together for years. They've worked with these clients. So that's good. But, regardless of the existence of the clients, I would want to buy the staff. And more significantly, I hadn't really appreciated how true that was until I started doing more follow up with my folks who've closed in the second year after the end of their acquisition and saying, what do you wish you had known beforehand? Is there anything I missed? That kind of thing. Is there anything you missed that I could point out for future people? And one of the themes that I heard over and over again was I didn't appreciate how important it would be to get a sense of the employee culture. I didn't understand, how significant it would be. And it's really challenging to do that in M&A because you have a third party. So my little, joke about that is we can't, like the buyer can't force the seller to agree that his employees or her employees are going to come over because you can't force somebody to
Mhm.
work somewhere since the Emancipation Proclamation, right? So that's a real challenge. So increasingly in my offer letters or my letters of intent, I will specify where that's really essential that as a material term of the agreement, the seller is going to let the buyer talk to the employees prior to closing. And my advice when a buyer is doing that before they buy the company and they're getting to meet with the employees for the first time, and I feel very strongly because it's one of those things where you give this advice all the time and then you get the feedback loop of people going, oh my God, I'm so glad you said that. So maybe, maybe I'm off base and people are just flattering, but I really think it's valuable is the first time as a buyer that you're encountering these employees, hand them like a physical, written, printed offer letter to take home because it's a very challenging market for getting and retaining staff. And when people hear, oh, the practice you work for is selling to some unknown person, they're thinking, I have a surgery scheduled. My mortgage
Yep.
is due next month. And they're hearing wah, 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 wah. And they don't care about your plans to, take it to the next level. They're really focused on their own circumstances. I've been building up PTO and my cruise ship plans are non-refundable. That's
Yep.
stuff that they're thinking about. They're not going to have efficient or accurate hearing. So by taking an offer letter that says, if this deal closes, you are guaranteed to have a job here for the same amount as you're making now, with the potential for, bonuses if you stay after the first tax season, and that kind of thing. And they can take it home. They can talk about it with their spouse. They can look at it. They can shake because it's like a very stressful moment for them, and read it and read it and read it. And that has a really good effect, because if you let any level of uncertainty happen, everyone's going to get on Indeed.com and they're going to find some remote work position where they can make exactly the same amount of money or more and do less, and they're gone, and then
Yep.
everything crumbles. So it's a really challenging part of the puzzle. It's really important to manage with all the soft skills you have.
That's excellent advice, right? Because as I think, when I read a lot about people's thoughts on private equity, that's what they fear, right? They just don't know what's going to happen. They're making assumptions based on movies, based on, the worst case scenarios of what private equity does. They think of evil people in suits who are just, I mean, who are just gonna do, I don't know, like bad things. So people just make those assumptions. So I really like this idea of giving somebody like something physical, paper that they can read, and yeah, I mean, it's outstanding.
I've had a lot of occasion in my career to have to terminate employees. And so specifically HR managers, because usually the HR manager is terminating employees. And then when a business is in the situation where they need to terminate an HR manager, they're usually not sure what to do, and they call a lawyer. And so I have been in the giving phase of a lot of terminations. And, I feel like that's the worst thing to be involved in. It's so anxiety provoking, but it's very similar for these employees. The uncertainty that they're experiencing is something that you have to address as quickly as possible. Like I said, it's a really competitive work environment. So what's going to happen too is it's not that everyone's going to necessarily pick up the phone and call the guy who's been trying to hire them for the last year. But you better believe that the best 10, 20% of the workers will, the ones who are the most motivated. So you'll have some left, but it probably won't be your very, very best.
Your very best employees. No, but that makes sense. If I put myself in their shoes, that's probably what I would do too. Just have a backup, right? If nothing else. And who knows, the backup may make an offer that I can't refuse.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's it's impacting the deal. To your question, it's impacting M&A a lot, because it is this challenging to, you can't force it. It's not like, anything else where you can say, all right, well, you promise you're going to give me that office chair, and I'm buying that office chair. That office chair has a family and a mind of her own. So
There makes sense. So now I want to talk about global teams, right? Because a lot of what's happening in the accounting world, because we can't find accountants, we're going out to countries like Philippines and India and building global teams. So I remember one thing you mentioned on the last call, that you tell everybody, buy an accounting firm that does an offshore and then do it after you buy them. So tell me more about that. Why do you say that?
Well, I think it probably depends on your appetite for taking on projects. Of note, I live in a Victorian home that's 135 years old.
Whoa.
So I have a good appetite for taking on a project, and I enjoy seeing something where you go, wow, this paint is terrible and it's going to look great if it's redone. And that's such a cheap solution. And if you've got vision, if you're interested in those type of low hanging fruit, like toggles to improve your profit margin, then accounting practices are for you. That's the best. I mean, way above and beyond real estate, like residential real estate, the margins, you have to tear out a kitchen and add,
Yeah.
do all these things. You can make the same margin change by making like a 2% raise on rates in the accounting practice, which everyone would go for. So it's so simple. But yes, that would be my thing, would be to take somebody. I mean, the perfect firm would be one where they currently have slightly, but not extremely under market rates. They're offshoring nothing. They are not auto billing anyone. And their workers are making like a little bit below, but not very much, like 5% below market, because then you can come in and they're paying $0 on marketing, right? That's like the perfect thing. You can pay $1,000 on marketing. You can raise rates by 10%. You can be the good guy by coming in and raising all the employees' salary. And you can start offshoring your bookkeeping services, which will like take tons of, usually the effect is not so much eliminating jobs in this industry. The effect is moving the more rote work offshore so that those pretty skilled folks that have been doing that stuff, and they've been reconciling and stuff, can focus on better and higher use for their time. So even if it's just managing the offshore teams. So
Agreed. I think what you said about not losing jobs, right? That's an important point, because offshoring as of now is related to technology.
yeah,
And a lot of big companies, what they did was they just offshored their tech departments, and that was done to save money.
yeah,
And a lot of jobs were shipped overseas. But in
yeah,
the accounting world, there's just not enough people here.
yeah,
So I've of all the firms that I've read about, the one that I worked with, not a single US job was lost, right? It was more about,
yeah,
hey, let's just give them more time. Let's then give them some of their life back,
yeah,
because without having like leveraging a global team, it was just getting too much. Like there was burnout, there was frustration, low
yes,
morale. So all of those things happen. And one thing I'm also seeing is like now a lot more strategic work is getting done like overseas. So more like bookkeeping, obviously, but like even with HR consulting, tax return prep, like there are CPAs. Like when went to set up my client's office in India,
yeah,
one research I did was to see how many CPAs are there in India. Like, are there enough? And I was just shocked to see so many people like with CPAs, like so many more people studying to be CPAs. And I was like, wow, like I mean, soon I would say India may actually have equal, if not more CPAs than the
yeah.
US.
And
So
like US,
that's just outstanding. Yeah, US CPAs, not like Indian accountants, like
yeah.
US CPAs. So that to me was just, it's just a staggering number.
It's extraordinary. I mean, the opportunity you can, I mean, as a regular person, if you're just, so one of the things you asked about trends at the beginning, we talked about private equity and kind of went down that road because it's, the clickbait. Everyone wants to know about the private equity.
Yeah.
But the trend that I see as much is regular search funders. Are you familiar with that term?
Search funds. I know search funds. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's two types of search funds. There's like the one you think of, which is somebody raises money from investors and then they quit their job and they're focused on finding a business and buying it with that
Yep.
raised money. And there's also what's called self-funded searchers, which is just a regular person trying to buy a business. Um,
Okay.
and usually those people start out with, they will say, I'm industry agnostic. They just want to buy a business. In both categories. So they'll say, I was looking at a golf cart dealership and then coin laundry, but that fell through. And then HVAC, but like something came up with the fleet of vehicles. So now I'm looking at an accounting practice, which is not what usually accounting practice sellers want to hear. So It's like, this is a different world. But it is a great solution for these folks because a lot of them came out of Harvard Business School. They're convinced that they can apply their MBA stuff to running any business and do it better. And that might be true, but these folks often came from a really different background culturally than like an HVAC business would
Mhm.
work well with. They go to the opera. They live in New York City and they've never had a driver's license, and now they're going to acquire a fleet of 20 trucks. Like it's not a good fit. But a lot of times they'll kind of realize that as they're going along in the process, and they'll say, now I'm focused on accounting practices, because those people do understand. They have accountants. They understand offices with cubicles and giant copiers. They get it. And so it makes it a really attractive acquisition target for those regulars. It's also referred to as ETA, entrepreneurs through acquisition. But one of the things that's, I say when I encounter somebody who's in that space is great. Invest. So maybe become an enrolled agent, really show these
Mhm.
sellers that you're committed to this industry. And it's not just the car wash is all sold for too much, so I'm going to buy your,
Yeah.
it's not a widget, it's a company that was created. And so, take the tests, become an enrolled agent, and take some other certifications. And, if you're an American EA and you're supervising a team of super qualified, Indian CPAs, you're going to provide great and efficient services usually. So, that's a great solution to deal with the burnout and the lack of quality representation that we see in the industry.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point because my last lead was a search fund person from Harvard Business School. So I got this message on LinkedIn, and he was like, "Hey, I'm doing the search fund, looking
Yeah.
to buy 3 accounting practices, and one of the first things I want to do after I settle down a bit is open our own office in India."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Great." So I agree. I mean, search funds, like that's how I learned about search funds. I didn't know what they were before that. So I started Googling, and I was like, "Oh, this is amazing, right?"
Yeah.
I
There-
wish when I was in business school this was more popular. I don't know if I would have done it, but I would have liked the option.
I think that about being an enrolled agent, honestly, because I had to work so hard through school, and then I did undergrad and I graduated early from undergrad and law school while working, and it was just such a grind. And I
I
think
can
if
imagine,
something
yeah.
had existed where I could have taken, self-studied, taken tests, and then essentially be a professional, I would have done that in a heartbeat, because it always felt to me like seeking a degree, even a law degree, was just a big song and dance that you were doing to get the ability to then actually learn the thing you were trying to learn. So,
Yeah, but people value that song and dance, right? That's unfortunate part, right? So yeah, don't even get me started. Like I wish like instead of my MBA, I would have just started my business right away. But
you really, yeah.
yeah, but without the MBA, I would have gotten my clients, and it's just
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
two
it's easy
years.
to say in retrospect, but I will say I got in at least one Ivy League school for law school, and I went to not an Ivy League school where I had a full ride scholarship, and I have zero regrets
Oh,
about
so
it.
you didn't have to deal with the student loan and everything,
No,
that nightmare. Oh, lucky
yeah,
you.
I know, right? I mean, that was the right call. I have had opportunities where probably the Ivy League would have gotten me in, through, and they didn't. They went with somebody else because I went with more of a no-name school. But those were all opportunities I would have not enjoyed.
Yeah.
So
No, I hear you because I went to UNC Chapel Hill. Great
okay,
school,
yeah,
right? All my buddies, all my professors loved it. But I had I had like a lot of scholarship from other schools that weren't quite ranked
yeah,
as well as UNC. Sometimes I do think about it because the
yeah,
student loan, like, it's all paid off now,
yeah.
but at the time, like it just felt like, ooh, you're trying to start a business, you're trying to cut costs, and oh, never hated banks more.
I know. Well, and if you think about, I mean, to put ourselves kind of back on the track, the school I went to for law school was, $30K a year at the time, I think, for 3 years. So that's 100K.
Right.
If you could just invest 100K, if traditional SBA financing, right? You put 10% down, that gets you $1 million firm. And then if you're buying an accounting practice, the average seller discretionary earnings is like 30 to 40%. So you're able to essentially leverage the same amount of money, have an
Yeah.
asset, and be spitting off, $350,000 a year. Of course, less the debt payments, but still, like, that's real. That's in the green, and we all
That's yeah.
in the red. So
I think that we'll need a separate podcast to discuss the college and the debt and everything. But coming back to offshoring and global teams, right? So there are two ways you can do offshoring, right? One is like you work with an outsourcing company, they give you you either pay them by hours or they give you like a dedicated team. But the other thing is direct ownership, where you own everything in
right.
India or Philippines, right? So what are your thoughts on, how one compares to the other?
Oh gosh. I mean, I think for my clients, I'd rather them have ownership in that, right? The direct ownership model, because then that's an asset that's part of what they're selling. So I'm always viewing things from that perspective. And there's not going to be there's less likely to be a service interruption. That's going to scramble things. So I think that's very appealing. Plus, you have all the internal revenue code stuff with like 7216 and all those requirements related to outsourcing, some of which I think you can lessen, or at least you can minimize risk by, being the one who controls the privacy and security procedures that the people use. So I think that's really attractive, the direct ownership model.
Yeah, so 7216, I think that's not a whole lot of people are well aware of what all of that entails, right?
Yeah.
So that's scary. Like I've seen people do outsourcing, sending their client tax info to India, Philippines, and not having heard of 7216. I'm like, that's a criminal
It's got
liability.
criminal
So
charges. Yeah. It's I have to admit, I mean, I wasn't born knowing about it, right? I learned about it at some point too. And I thought, why have I never heard about this? And was shocked. I mean, you can straight up go to the internal IRS.gov and find the regulations. And I think my impression has been it's a little bit better understood by CPAs because it's covered by the AI CPA and they have some secondary sources. But it doesn't just apply to CPAs, it applies to all tax preparers.
everyone, yeah.
Everyone. And it has, like you insinuated, potential criminal penalties associated with failing to use information or using taxpayer information the wrong way. And taxpayer information is defined as like everything. So
Everything.
it's not limited at all. It's their name, it's their everything. And I was reading it the other day, and I would love to hear if somebody disagrees with me here. But I saw no mechanism by which you are permitted to disclose social security numbers of taxpayers across country lines. Even, I assume that there's some additional like caveat if you're employing those folks, but the FAQ on the IRS website straight up says you have to redact all social security numbers and then put them back in once it comes back to the US, which I have never heard anyone do.
Ooh, yeah, I've not heard anyone do that either. I
Yeah.
know like a lot of tax software now, they have built-in functionalities to help you comply with 7216,
Yeah.
so that makes it easier.
Yeah.
They sort of create a wall that, okay, if you have 1,000 clients and 900 said, yes, we'll sign the 7216,
Right.
but 100 said we won't, so you
Yeah.
can keep the information separate because your India team can't even see their names of
Yes.
anybody who said no.
Interesting. That's a good solution. But yeah, so as you insinuated, just for the viewer listeners, there's consents that you have to get signed. And it's not like the regular consents that are called click wrap consents where you can just have somebody click a check button. It specifically says that the person has to sign and date it. It can be electronic signature, but still it has to be signed and dated. It can't just be information that's emailed like, hey, by using us, you're consenting to us using your taxpayer information. Like it has to be very detailed and it has to be term limited. Did you know that? Where you have to say, if you don't say that it's limited for a certain period of time, the consent, and then you have to track it and go back and get a new consent when that term ends. If you don't say it, they impute that it only is effective for 1 year.
That's correct. Yep. If you don't put in a term limit, it's only for a year.
Yeah.
And a lot of accountants, I feel, get scared when they hear this.
Yeah.
But like my experience, and like if you look up data, like there's very few people who actually don't sign this because
Yeah.
I mean most firms right now are sending stuff overseas, and the direct ownership helps with it. So that's what I saw with my past client, right? They were nervous, but when they talked to their client that, hey, this is our, it's like a branch office. Like we've hired these people, we own them, we have all the data. The data never goes to a third party. So that then makes it super easy.
Yeah.
The other thing, my client said something amazing. Like he was like, I told their clients that if you don't want to send your work overseas, like you'll have to go downstream. Like
Yeah.
any firm that's us or bigger than us is already doing that.
Oh, that is so
So,
true. Yeah.
so
And I've seen under the hood of the big four, not all of them, so it won't be clear which one I'm referring to, but they're not, I don't think they're doing it right. So,
no, a lot of people aren't.
yeah, it's the compliance factor is, I would say splotchy, but at the same time, again, hammering the drum you hammered at the beginning, accountants are slow to change. And this rule didn't come out till 2012, which young people are going, I was like born then or whatever. But for regular middle-aged folks, that's like kind of recent. So
It is
you can
recent.
see how people, as a lawyer, I get a lot of that where people say that can't be the law. I've never heard of it before. That's absurd. It just is. And
Yeah.
haven't heard about it because it hasn't been around so long that it's worked its way into the narrative of what everybody talks about and knows.
And also like offshoring has just started to happen, right? So before this, there wasn't like a big need for awareness for 70 to 16.
Yeah.
But now people need to know, like,
Yeah.
I think the fear that the clients won't sign is more in our minds than like the clients are more accepting of that.
Yeah.
But it still needs to be done.
And an attempt at compliance is way better than head in sand mentality.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
When you do go, when I'm advising clients in any area about, legal compliance, I'm a small business attorney, right? So there's business judgment calls and everything. And for the most part, you can't start a business by complying with every single thing or you'll never get off the ground. So I do recognize that everyone has to accept risk in different places. So I try to explain to my business owners, like, why? Who cares? Who is the audience for this? And, I think we all picture being sued by somebody and standing in front of a judge who might be wearing a white wig for some reason, because that's what we saw a lot like growing up in. It's very scary. And that's the audience that they're picturing. But more commonly, the audience for regulating or reviewing your compliance is going to be the person who's going to buy you. And so that upstream person that you were talking about, all of them use outsourced labor. All of them comply with this. They're going to look at you. They're going to offer you an absurd amount of money. You're going to be so thrilled. And then during the diligence process, they're going to say, hey, tell me about your compliance with 7216. You're going to say, what's that? And then all of a sudden they're chipping away at the purchase price, or they're adding these huge carve outs and you're having to pay lawyers on both sides to talk about like your, theoretical exposure and all of these different circumstances. And you'll think, I wish I had just looked into this on the front end.
Oh yeah, it's a simple and easy thing to comply, but if you don't, big penalties, big headaches down the road.
Yeah. And we didn't mention the contractor part, where if you have a contractor, you're mandated to provide them with written disclosure of their obligations under 7216. So
yeah,
that's a part of it.
Okay. So now I want to talk more about the Deal Academy, right? So like, how did that come to be? Like, yeah.
Well, I talked about earlier how at the end of the year, I would review my kind of clients and think who is my favorite. So one of the things that I regularly do is I look and say, I black out the money I made from clients, right? And I look and I think, who do I feel like I made the most money from? And that has been different, right? So I just want, and I add little objective criteria to each one, scale of 1 to 10, how, enjoyable was this to work for, scale of 1 to 10, all these things. So one of the things that I do when I do that kind of end of the year analysis is look at the people who didn't hire me and what they did instead. And you don't always have perfect visibility into that, but very, very commonly when people did go a different direction or they chose not to hire me, the vast majority of the cases, they chose no attorney. So it wasn't me versus some other lawyer, which is kind of nice for your ego, but it was me against no one. In the first year, I thought, well, that's what it's going to be. The second year, I continued to see that trend, and I started to realize that no attorney is really hard to compete with because it's free and immediate. And those are really, and it's not, having no lawyer means you're never confronted with these really harsh, scary realities too. So it's a kind of enjoyable experience to a certain personality type to have no lawyer. And, lawyers think they're accountants, right? Accountants think they're lawyers. So they're maybe more likely than the average business person to say, I've got this, I'll do it myself. But that's the mission, right? I want people to not make the silly mistakes that SE made over and over again. So if that's the case, how do I appeal to people who are going to proceed with no lawyer? And so that's why I created the courses and each of them is entitled Become the Expert. And it's just trying to get people educated enough that hopefully for a very, very fraction of the cost of retaining any lawyer, they can at least have a lot of the insights that lawyers have when they're doing this to avoid some of the big things that the values that we add. And they can learn it themselves. It also has the effect of kind of mounting that Dunning-Kruger effect of, when you think your competency is way up here because you don't know enough. And then as you know more, your perceived competency diminishes.
Yeah.
But, it comes in line. There are things people can do themselves. Absolutely. And this is not rocket science. If you take the time, any person could learn how to do any literate person could learn how to do a lot of the legal work. You won't necessarily be able to easily learn on your own the lessons that somebody learns when they see hundreds of deals. So I take these modules and try to give those lessons to people and kind of explain how it goes. So there's one on the letter of intent. And that's an area that's a real pain point for me and my clients because they'll say, okay, I was interested in this listing. I'm really excited about it, but the broker says they need a letter of intent. And I said, what's that? And they sent me this template. So should I just fill it out? And that's exactly the best moment to get all of the terms of the deal straightened out in your favor. So if you miss that tiny window, you're just going to be playing catch up for the entire deal process. But you don't know at that point whether your offer is going to get accepted. So you're in a situation where you're thinking, am I going to pay a couple grand to some lawyer to put together a 2-page letter and then not even get it accepted? That's absurd. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do it myself. And then, absolutely every single time that somebody does the letter of intent themselves, they lose more than several $1,000s in deal points that they could have gotten better. And so I made the course so that when somebody is doing that, they can take a cheap course, watch it over and over again with every letter. It comes with a questionnaire that's all of the terms you should think about. It comes with a template. If you want to, mash it in together, go for it. You'll be way better off than just having some template and not having appropriately considered each deal point.
That is amazing. And you just gave me an idea for myself as well. Because I was thinking who am I losing business to, right? And a lot of time it's to no one. People then just decide to do it themselves. And it's an excellent idea. And you also answered my next question. I was going to ask you, what's your most popular course?
Yeah.
So it seems like it's the letter of intent course.
The letter of intent, although the NDA course has been spiking up lately, it's just the non-disclosure agreement course. That bugs me because everybody, before they even get to the letter of intent, has signed, a handful of non-disclosure agreements. But And it's not reasonable at all to think anybody should engage a lawyer to review an NDA before they sign them. That would be so challenging. I mean, every now and then people do, and it's great, but I think it would be really like clunky in business to have that. But there's at the same time, weirdly, so many gross hidden terms in these non-disclosure agreements that I run across all the time where you think, oh my gosh, it's like unethical that they would even call it a non-disclosure agreement if it includes like a non-compete in there, or, you know, all of these invention assignment, or I've seen all of that. I've seen 90-day exclusivity in a non-disclosure agreement, which has a huge impact on a person who's signing it. So I've been selling a lot more of that course too, that just says, you know, here's what you're looking for when you're looking at a non-disclosure, you know, read it. Like, here's what you're reading it for. And if it's too bad or you don't understand it, here's a template that's okay. So refer back, you know, say, I'm not signing yours, you sign mine. So.
I like the first suggestion, read it.
Yeah.
So if somebody's interested in buying, selling from, it seems like the best time for them to call you is like on day one. Not after they sign the NDA, not after they sign the LOI. It's on day one, like, and because like, they'll make small mistakes that'll end up costing them a lot more than what they would pay you for it.
That is true. That is where probably it's this tension, because I get it. That's where people are the least willing to spend money on deal costs because it's the most nebulous, and maybe it won't turn into anything. But it is where like the right advisor can provide the most value. So, you know, it's just that was the goal of Deal Academy, was to bridge that gap and try to, you know, pull that value that I have to offer as far forward and make it as affordable and appealing and digestible as possible for folks.
Amazing. Great. I do want to talk about your podcast too. It's how did you come out? Like it's such a non-intuitive way of teaching people that, right? Because like instead of talking about hey things that went well, we're gonna talk about things that didn't go well, things that did go well. So
Yeah.
how did that come to be? And
Oh, well, there's a lot. If you're in this kind of ETA, entrepreneur through acquisition community, especially, there's a lot of TikTok style influencers who have a lot of clickbait that says, you know, become a billionaire overnight, buy a trucking business, you know, and run it from the Mediterranean on your sailboat. And that's just so not realistic. But nobody, I mean,
I would click that.
Right? I click it. That's why I know it's there. As I'm like, oh, subscribe. Of course, we all click it. And I find it very attractive. It would be a lot easier to get subscribers if that was your message. And you get a lot of views and you're selling a quick fix, and it's so unrealistic. Like, especially industry wide, right? Like not every person can take over every industry of business. And oh my goodness, I have talked to people who are so off base. They're going, well, you know, I do digital marketing, so I'm going to buy 6 HVAC companies in Texas, although I live in Maine, and I'm just going to run them remotely and just really white label the services and do a little digital marketing. And like, that's not realistic. That's you're going to take on millions of dollars of debt, and you have no experience running a business. You have no experience in the industry. You have no credibility, and you're just going to run some ads. Like, that's probably not going to end particularly well for everyone. And so I really hate to see it when I see the clickbait stuff, because this is people's entire financial livelihoods, and they're running ramshot down some avenue because they saw like an attractive influencer with a good video editor talking about how rich it's going to make them so fast. And there's financing available, you know, that's not good. So we really wanted to focus on the other side of the equation and, you know, offer some like deals that didn't get to closing, because you never see those, right? And you see a lot of people who, I'm using the term influencer, but they have like community groups and followings where they say, I own 20 businesses, but if you look into it, they own like a 1% share in 20 different businesses. And they, you know, they're speaking from a place of not, well, you know, something near it. So like ignorance adjacent, and people are following that advice with their entire financial futures, you know, wrapped up into it, and they're headed towards bankruptcy. So I think it's really important to say, okay, here's what you see when the deals get to closing, you'll see that post, hey, I closed on a deal. I'm so excited. It's going great. But you didn't see the 20 that fell through. And you didn't see what happened the year after closing when the unexpected thing came up. And you didn't see, the ways in which all of these things differed from the way it seemed. I, as a lawyer, have had so many times that I've had clients do something that they advertise as like a collaborative merger or something really positive. And I've had people come up to me and say, what did they sell for? I can't believe they sold for, to that big company. That's amazing. They're just like so rich now. But I know from the inside and doing the documents that they sold for like $100 in their email list because they were going out of business. Like the thing you see on social media or on press releases or on newsletters or on websites or when people tell you is always going to be the most calculated version of the reality, and people make choices based on that. And that's where it terrifies me, because you don't see the inside, and you're thinking there's a lot higher likelihood of success a lot more easily than there is.
Oh, absolutely. I think social media, it just presents things the way they aren't. And I think most of us know that's true, but we still fall for it because we want to believe that that's true.
Yeah.
That there is an easier way out there.
And that's the best way to sell something. If I was telling you right now, you'll be a billionaire overnight if you buy an accounting practice, that would be great for business.
I would be downloading your LOI course right now. Let's do that.
You could just edit this. Now that I'm thinking about it more, you'll be a billionaire. Just take out the other stuff that came first.
I will do that. So we're almost up at the time. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Anything else you're passionate about? Anything else you want to share about your Deal Academy, the Dealmakers podcast, or anything that I didn't ask you that I think that you think we should talk about?
I mean, this is it, right? So I really am enjoying advising clients in this space. It's the most exciting space I think there is out there right now. I know that that's biased, but it's true. And I think it's so cool what you're doing to facilitate, this really, I call it like conscientious, de-risked outsourcing that you're providing and that you're helping facilitate. I think that's fantastic and absolutely what the industry needs. It's going to have a great impact. So I just want people to, listen to the podcast. If you have a story of a deal that didn't go through for some reason, let's come on and talk about it with me. And people can learn from it. And, if people are looking to, even pre-contemplative in selling their practices, that's also the area where, early intervention is everything. So getting them up to that kind of perfect, very, very attractive to private equity and search fund and investor space is a big passion project of ours as well.
Great. Well, for all the listeners, if you're looking to buy or sell a firm, if you have any questions around that process, Sara is the person to go to. She is the lawyer for accountants, and don't wait till you absolutely feel you need a lawyer. The first moment you think whether or not, should I be hiring a lawyer this time? Yes, that is the point, right? Don't sign an NDA without her taking a look at it. Don't sign an LOI without her looking it over. So thank you, Sara. Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you. Absolutely.
Likewise.
I'll turn off the recording. Please stay online for a minute.
Sure thing.